Let me start by saying that I don't presume to second guess anyone that served in this chamber back in 2018, nor do I second guess any of the decisions that were made at that time in this chamber. I can't imagine what those serving must have gone through. I can't imagine the pressures that you were under. I also want it known that I have actually visited Parkland, even though I live 12 hours away. I was in South Florida visiting my son in college and realized that it was just a 25-minute drive. And I wanted to see what it was like. So I remember driving down the manicured streets and, you get to the roundabout. I think I parked the car down at the local bank and I walked up the sidewalk to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And I hope things have changed, Representative Hunchofsky, because the original building was still standing when I was there. It was fenced off. But ladies and gentlemen, if you've never been, back in November of 22, Representative, the evil was still palpable in the air. So you walk by the abandoned school. There's actually other buildings there where kids currently attend school. And they have a nice little, I guess it's a memorial garden that's right out in front by the sign that says Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So I sat down and I just kind of took it all in. And I didn't know how that experience would affect me. But the way it affected me, it inspired me to dig a little deeper, do a little research. Because as we all know, the media focuses on the bad guy. So we all know about the villain of Parkland. How many of you know that there were heroes that day at Parkland? I was really struck by the story of one 15-year-old that I read about, who held his classroom door shut, knowing that there was a madman on the other side of that door. And he received a barrage of hellfire, holding that door shut. So there were definitely heroes that day. And it inspired me to go home, and here we are 5 years later, and it kind of inspires you to look back and say, well, what exactly did we do? And did we do the right things? Well, as we all know this year, right 5 years down the road, let's start with the villain of Parkland. We now know that he's getting 3 hots and a cot courtesy of the Florida taxpayer. And I appreciate my friend Representative Jacques for ensuring that such an injustice will never happen again. Thank you, Representative Jacques, for your bill earlier this session. But what about the unsung heroes? Well, we are now 5 years down the road. So if you were 15 at the time, you're 20 now. How many of you remember what it was like to be 20 years old? I'm sure a lot of those kids have moved on. I'm sure a lot of those kids are maybe working their first job. Maybe they have their first apartment that they're paying rent for. Maybe some of them are in college. Maybe some of them are trying to find their way. And as you remember, your first apartment when you were 19 or 20, they're usually not in the safest neighborhoods. Let's also talk about what a lot of those survivors are probably going through. I can't imagine that less than a majority of them, probably all of them, are dealing with some form of post-traumatic stress disorder. I see it in my military patients back in the Panhandle. I'm sure these survivors have some degree of PTSD. And for those of you that don't know what that's like, let me explain to you what PTSD is like. People with PTSD, they don't like to go to movie theaters because they don't know who's sitting behind them. They don't like going to concerts or baseball games because it's a big crowd and you can't vouch for everybody in that crowd. I'm sure most of you know PTSD patients, they have trouble sleeping. I would imagine if you were a 15-year-old survivor of that horrible tragedy, you probably sleep with one eye open now. And then, of course, there's the nightmares. So, if you're dealing with PTSD and you are looking for a way to make the nightmares go away, a way to feel safe, and you look back at what we did in 2018, we effectively rendered those heroes defenseless. Where I'm from, we don't punish heroes by taking their rights away. And not only that, like I said, they're just 20 years old today. It will be another year until they can legally purchase a firearm to protect them from the evildoers that are out there today, the people who wish them harm, the people who may want to break into their apartment, the people who may intend them harm. It will still be yet another year until they can properly defend themselves. Is that how you treat heroes? Believe it or not, gun rights are important to a lot of Floridians. I know they're important in my district. It's a real big deal. I actually ran my campaign on the promise that I could be the representative to come here to Tallahassee and make a compelling argument for restoring the gun rights to our 18, 19, and 20-year-old adults. I pray that I have just done so today. Thank you.
Leader Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you. Yield the remainder.